What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Import Modify. Got the 5th gen Honda Prelude manual swap part 2. So if you're here for the first time, go find part 1. It'll catch you up to where we at right now. So I took the time and I did the things that I needed to do in the engine bay so that we can just stick to the manual swap side of things, right? Because whenever you do a manual swap, you should have these items in your car unless they were deleted, and that was the power steering feed and return line. I put it in and put the return line in with the cooler, new lines and well, hoses on the end right there and clamps. And I also took the time and wired in the horns right there. I had them mounted but they weren't wired, so took the time and did that. I also did the clutch line though, so it was a little tedious and I just took care of it off camera. But I'll explain to you guys how I did it. And if you see the line right there, it's in there. It goes above the brake booster, kind of curves down through here under this valve for the heater core, and around the backside of the evap canister, and then it terminates right there into this accumulator looking thing that's on a bracket. And this hose right here has a banjo connector, which bolts down right here, then goes to your slave. So basically the way that I got it out was I took this in and I unbolted it right on both ends, and I just kind of bent this in outward, and that way it gave it more of a U shape, and that allowed me to pull it out a little bit and then turn it left or right and work the little corners out of the creases and get it all out of the obstacles, right? So a little tedious, but once I got it out, I kept the shape so that when I put it back in, I just used the same method and was able to put it back in its general place. And that needs a little bit more bending and massaging, but I'll steal some wall mounts or firewall mounts from the other car and get it fastened up, and everything should be good on that. So got my clutch in. This is a XTD stage 2 clutch, and it's a cheap eBay brand, but they work okay. I've had them in the past on other Hondas and they hold up. So I did take the time and replace the rear main seal, just because the general maintenance, the seal that was on it, it's hard and brittle, and it's probably the OEM one. You hear that? Sounds like hard plastic. So that desperately needed to be done. I took the time and I did that, so now we don't have to worry about leaks after doing all this work, right? Just kind of cover our bases. The flywheel I took off of the other engine and clutch, and I took a sanding disc on a drill and basically resurfaced it just to clean it up, and so it's fresh for the other clutch. Kind of a cheap man's way of resurfacing the flywheel, but it is what it is. It should hold up just fine. There was not a whole lot of hot spots on it, so it should be good. And what we're gonna do now to start things off is we're gonna mount this flywheel. And speaking about mounting the flywheel, you have to have manual flywheel bolts, right? Because this is a flywheel bolt. This is an automatic drive plate bolt. See the difference right there? So you have to have the manual flywheel bolts. So we're gonna mount the flywheel on. We're gonna torque it down to 76 foot-pounds. Then we're gonna use the alignment tool, mount up the pressure plate, and those bolts right there are gonna be 19 foot-pounds. And after that, we will take the throwout bearing out. We'll grease up the arm and everything, and also the sliding portion for the throwout bearing. We'll grease that up. I like to use NICs for that, and we'll get that replaced and freshened up, and then we'll mate this thing together. And then once we do that, we'll put brackets and stuff on and plop it back into the engine bay. Work on some wiring and crank this thing up for the first time, right? I can't wait. Let's do it. right, so we got the flywheel, the clutch, the transmission, starter all mounted up, along with the manual specific rear bracket. And it's about that time we go ahead and put it into the car. Once I have it in the car, I'll put the bottom bracket on and axles and all that stuff that's left over. And then once it's all together, we'll go ahead and do the wiring, fill the fluids, and start it up. Alright y'all, engine and transmission is back in the car. Now you do not have to remove the engine to do this job. I chose to do it because I wanted to clean things up, and if you watched the first part, you know why. So whenever you do take the engine and transmission out of the engine bay, you do have to remove the crank pulley to get the proper clearance, because if you don't have it off, it will interfere between the rails and not have enough room. So that is a must. You have to do it right. So now that we have it all back into the engine bay, we're gonna go ahead and just throw everything back together. We're gonna start with the axles. This is a manual specific item. You need manual axles and half shaft for the swap, and also this bottom brace, that's manual specific. It goes from the bottom of the engine to the bottom of the transmission. So I wanna start with the axles. Let's just lift it up high and let's go for it, and we'll just start putting things on layer by layer, right? And once it's all said and done, that's when we'll do the wiring to the 10-pin connector and get it all to where it's done, put the fluids in, and go.
How did you find a way to run from the city of the sun? You could have stayed, it's only over when the day is done. I never knew you was a runner, yeah. I mistook you for a son. It don't matter what we think when it's all over, 'cause this is our last chance to leave it all behind. Raise your voice and raise your power, yeah. This is our last chance to leave it all behind. Raise your voice and raise your power.
Alright guys, so I got a little bit carried away with it because I wanted to get all the accessories and everything mounted up and all of it done to get to the point where we got to do the wiring. But we got everything back together as far as the power steering system, and now we have the AC system as well, all completed and put in place. So it's looking like factory, especially with this heat shield on. You know, it was on that engine. I decided to utilize it because it does keep heat away from critical components on the engine, so why not use it, right? We're kind of returning this thing to a factory-like state to where everything works. As far as the condenser goes, where I had the horns mounted through this factory hole, well, they utilized that for the mounting on the condenser. So I just went ahead, took the bolts off, and put the bolts right back through, because I had nuts on the back of it, and mounted it up, and just still allowed me to keep where the horns are located at. So I didn't put the cruise control fully in yet, and that's because we're gonna do the wiring, right? And before we jump into the wiring, let's go ahead and check out the shifting on the shifter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Reverse, you got to kind of wiggle it in. It does fall in. Once the transmission rotates, when the engine's running, that'll fall in place pretty well. It seems to shift pretty good. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead now and move on to the wiring. So all right, so we're gonna get down to the nitty-gritty on the wiring. I'm gonna explain things as easy as I can, because it's not that difficult. If you guys aren't tech savvy with the wiring and all that stuff, or have done much, it's not that bad. So I do solder all my connections, and that's done with the soldering iron and solder, and I use heat shrink to cover it up and insulate it, right? So that's the way I go about it, and you can watch the time lapse as I do it to get an idea. But there are YouTube tutorials out there that will teach you guys how to solder. It's not hard, and it ensures that all your connections will be good for a long time. So there's three connectors that we have to worry about whenever we're doing this manual swap. That is the 10-pin connector, which went to the gear position switch. We cut that off. This one is the top switch on the clutch, the bottom switch on the clutch. This one is for the safety start. This one's for the cruise control. This one is for everything connecting to it, and also tricking the computer into thinking that it's in neutral or park. So I found a diagram of this connector and the pin out, right? So it's pointing to the side that goes to the transmission, which we cut out. And if you look at it, it shows the mounting tabs. So you look at it in that orientation. So looking at it like that, we can see that pin 1 starts at the top left and works its way down. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So out of those 10 pins, we only have to really worry about 4 of them, right? And the ones that we have to worry about is 1, 2, and 3, and 9. Okay, so 1 is the gray, 2 is the pink, 3 is the red and white stripe, 9 is the white. So the first thing we're gonna do is for the clutch safety start, right? That associates with this. Well, for the clutch safety start, that's gonna go between pins 3 and 1, just like that. But there's gonna be wires that are ran to it, right? And that will give us the safety function of holding in the, or depressing the clutch to start it, right? Because you don't want it to start when the clutch is not engaged. Then if it's in gear, it'll start taking off on you, right? So it's a safety feature, we want that. This one right here, this is for your cruise control. Cruise is just gonna go between pin 2 and ground. So this wire will be terminated at ground. For the reverse switch is the switch on your transmission right here, right? That's your reverse switch. There's 2 wires. So that is going to be associated with pins 3 and 9. So 3 and 9. So 3 is actually used in 2 places, okay? So we're gonna have to have 2 wires coming off of 3 that we're gonna have to solder in. And the rest of them will just have 1 wire that's gonna be soldered to them, making it a complete wire. This one's the only one that's gonna be forked out, because we're using it in 2 places. right, y'all, so the wiring is done, and the hardest part was figuring out where to route it through the firewall. Now, it's terminated right there at that connector, right? We got it split off to the reverse switch, and then it wired in the rest of the way to this harness that I made. It comes up through here. It's gonna mount on the firewall, and where I have it going through at is right there in between the throttle and cruise control area. And the reason I did that is there's hardly no room under the dash to route that, and I'll show you exactly where it is and why I chose that location. So if you see up here, this is where the harness goes through the firewall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some clamps, and I'm going to use these studs and bolt those clamps up, and that will secure it up here on this bracket and keep it out of the way of the cables. Now it routes up through here, it follows the bar, and then it comes up to right here. I left a little bit of slack, right? And it connects to the cruise control switch and the clutch switch. So makes sense to do it that way. And everything is complete. It's not really hard to do. Just take your time and just get it done. Enough being said about being done. You guys are gonna see me whenever this is all put back together and all the fluids and everything is bled. And then from there, we're just gonna go straight into cranking it and trying it out for the first time. Let's do it. All right, everybody, I got it all back together. I got the fluids and everything filled up, and the clutch is bled. And now I'm opposed with another problem. And that problem is D-force flashing check engine light. I went ahead and I scanned it already, and it's two codes, P700 and P1753, all related to the transmission, right? And we know that's gonna be an issue because we swapped it. So I did more research, and turns out there's one more piece to the puzzle that we gotta do, and that's the ECU. We're gonna go ahead and swap this thing from an auto function to a manual, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to just do that. Also, under the kick panel, down here under the kick panel is where you're gonna find the ECU and the TCM. Once we do the manual swap on the ECU, we're gonna go ahead and disconnect the TCM, and then after that, everything should be good to go. And we're gonna take this thing on its first little drive. All right, so the kick panel is underneath the carpet. There are two 10mm bolts on studs. You take those off, and then you're able to lift this up. Underneath here, on the right side, you have the ECU. On the left side, right next to it, you have the TCM. So to start things off, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm going to disconnect these connectors. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the TCM and the ECM. And then we're gonna go ahead and open up this thing and swap out a resistor. That's basically all you gotta do, is swap out a resistor, and then it'll put it in manual mode. And then we can leave this off. We'll just tape up the connectors, make sure it doesn't have a chance to short to anything. And then we'll just reconnect these in, and it should be good. Okay, the ECU is out of the car now, and we're gonna go ahead and remove 4 screws on each side. And then we'll remove the covers, and then we're gonna be using one resistor to remove from one spot to another. All right, so looking on the bottom corner of this ECU, you see RP13. We're gonna be removing that top resistor, and on the other side, RP14, right in this area. We're gonna be placing it right there, and that's all you have to do. All right, so we got the resistor swapped in the middle, RPF 14. It's in there. It's tedious. They're very small. I had to use a pick in order to hold it down while I use a soldering iron. I just basically wet the end of the soldering iron with fresh solder and held it down with a pick and just dabbed it on each end, and that was enough to get it to stick. That's where it was at, right here. RP is it RP13 right here? I removed it from RP14 in the middle. That's where I installed it. That's all you got to do. It's tedious. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, find somebody who is good at doing soldering and is able to do it. First time messing with something that small, it's tedious. All right, moment of truth. I have it installed right there. I have the carpet down in case I have to remove it if I didn't solder it right, because it's very small. I hope I got a good contact on both ends. Let's see what happens. There you go. There's no TCM, so there's no lights right there, no check engine light. Everything looks to be good. Proud of myself. That's a very small piece to solder in. Glad I got it. All right, I'm gonna let this thing warm up, get the fluid circulating, make sure everything is topped off correctly, and then we're gonna take this thing out on the road and see how it does. Finally, right? All right, y'all, it's all together. Everything's good, got the seats in. Let's go ahead and take this thing on a spin and see how it works out for us. I got all the trim pieces and stuff in, also down here. The hell? It's not want to start now. There it is. Had me worried for a second. Right, we're off. I should have cleaned this up, guys. Sorry about that. It's been sitting. This ECU isn't 100% for this engine because it's a H22 ECU and we have an H23 engine. So it may not have the best performance, but it ought to be better than that automatic, right? Power steering, about to test that out. So I put that, oh, that feels nice. Haha! Success, baby, success. And I felt the ABS work on that bump. It engaged, so ABS is working. Hell yeah. We got a manual swapped Honda Prelude, guys. See if we can hit VTEC. Yeah, I felt it kick in just for a moment. It's too bumpy right here. Alright y'all, so in 2 episodes we did a Honda Prelude 5th gen manual swap start to finish. Now, you're here watching it for the information to do your swap. Hopefully these 2 videos help you guys out. And if you found this one and haven't watched the first one, watch the first one. And I hope this helps y'all with y'all's project. I definitely learned a lot in it, and I'm happy with the results, right? So we have all the accessories in. I utilized all the parts necessary that I could off the donor car in order to make this one complete, and it is. And now it is manual swapped along with that, and it's pretty cool. I do have a manual Honda Prelude ECU with the key and everything. I could have went that route, but I chose not to because you guys would be taking it on as if y'all would be in that scenario without one. So I did the mod for the ECU to show you guys as well. So there you go. Start to finish, 5th gen Honda Prelude manual 5-speed swap. Go ahead and get some, right? All right, man, I'm done on this episode, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all learned something from it. I definitely have. Until the next one, y'all have a good day. Peace out.